nowhere unless we share with each other. We gotta start making changes. Learn to see me as a brother instead of two distant strangers.
X by Ilyasa Shabazz and Kekla Magoon. X is a first-person pretense narrative that accentuates the experiences that affected Malcolm from early childhood to his eventual imprisonment for theft at age 20. He will eventually find the faith that would lead him on a new path and a voice that still resonates today. Even though Malcolm X is a historical figure, this is a fictional adaptation of his early life. The story is told from Malcolm's point of view as he struggles with family tragedy, adolescence, and racism in America during this time period.
Who are the authors? Ilyasa Shabazz is the third daughter of Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz. She is an author, community organizer, social activist, and motivational speaker. Kekla Magoon is an award-winning author of 10 novels for young adults. She has received an NAACP Image Award, the John Steptoe New Talent Award, 2 Coretta Scott King honors, the Walter Award honor, and been longlisted for the National Book Award. She also writes nonfiction on historical topics. Kekla conducts school and library visits nationwide and serves on the Writers' Council for the National Writing Project.
X, a novel, is a historical fiction text. The authors use chronological order and flashbacks to tell Malcolm's story. 2 central figures are Malcolm Little and Earl. The story is told during a time period where blacks and whites are still segregated. Some of the settings are Lansing, Michigan, Boston, Massachusetts, and Harlem, New York. Some conflicts that Malcolm has to deal with are whether to stay in Lansing, Michigan, or start over in Boston, Massachusetts, and in society, violence between blacks and the KKK, or just white people in general.
The authors wrote this novel to inform readers about Malcolm's early life before he became a well-known minister and a human rights activist. The author's style is very simple, and there's a lot of figurative language present just to give the readers that image of Malcolm and what he was going to. And also they use metaphors and slick words and phrases, because in that era it was the jazz age coming up in Harlem, and when he moved to Harlem he began becoming really sly and slick, and he wasn't saying too much, so he would use metaphors to relate to something that meant more.
Some significant details to take into consideration in the book X is how both of his parents were activists for African American rights. He begins spending time with a hipster named Shorty, who introduces him to the life in Roxbury, and he gets him a job at a club called the Roseland Ballroom. He gets arrested after moving back to Boston after he was on the run, and he meets a prisoner by the name Bembry, who gives him a book by the civil rights activist named W.E.B. Boris, who causes him to get into the Nation of Islam, and after he joins the Nation of Islam, he goes on as the Malcolm X we know today.
A powerful passage from the story is as follows. The government men dragged Mom out of the house. They held her by the elbows and ankles and shoulders and thighs, their harsh, meaty hands digging into her softness. She flailed against their touch, but they overpowered her with ease, the way white men always know how to do. On page 58. This is a powerful passage because it shows how harsh and unfair black people, male or female, were treated by white authority figures during this time period. Even though slavery was technically abolished in 1865, 100 years later there is institutionalized oppression of black people. The quote-unquote separate but equal doctrine has further pushed the idea that blacks were less than and will always be less than their white counterparts. This way of thinking has condemned black citizens to terrible treatment in facilities.
X, a novel by Ilyasa Shabazz and Kekla Magoon, is an entertaining first-person account of Malcolm's early life and social issues happening in that time period. We all are taught about militant Malcolm, but now let's learn a little about Malcolm before he changed. Other books by Ilyasa Shabazz are Growing Up X, Malcolm Little, The Boy Who Grew Up to Be Malcolm, Betty Before X. Some books by Kekla Magoon are The Rock in the River, Camo Girl, and Fire in the Streets.
This book is definitely worth a read if you have a personal interest in Malcolm X's childhood and personal history / upbringing. This is a book written for a teenage/young adult audience and is definitely an appropriate recommended reading for students. It gives you a background about Malcolm X that isn't taught to you in school, and it helps you understand him more as a person.
Unless we share with each other, we gotta start making changes. Learn to see me as a brother instead of two distant strangers.